If you think you've heard all of the unbelievable stories to come out of the Philippines this year, hold on, because this could be the wildest of all. It concerns the discovery of what was believed to be a Stone Age tribe of cavemen living there intact, untouched by the modern world. But there was a curious mystery surrounding this tribe, and that sent Tom Jarrell on a grueling adventure investigation into the jungles in search of the truth. And what he found is amazing.
It was hailed in the press worldwide as the greatest anthropological find of the century. The time was the early 1970s, the place deep inside the rainforest of the southern Philippine island of Mindanao. The amazing discovery of the Tassadai, a small band of Stone Age cavemen reportedly isolated for hundreds of years, reportedly speaking their own dialect. The Tassadai were said to have no agriculture, to be simple food gatherers, subsisting on whatever Mother Nature could offer them around the caves. Tadpoles, crabs, wild yams, and pith of palm. They dressed in orchid leaf G-strings and leafy skirts, and they appeared to be monogamous. If by chance you were looking for Fred and Wilmer Flintstone, you wouldn't find them here among these noble savages. The Tassadai were quite the opposite. They were gentle and loving. They were said to have no words for war or enemy or weapon. Among them, one family stood out in all the gushing documentaries and picture spreads. The family of this man, Bilangan, his shy wife, Itut, and their adorable teenage boys. The cutest of them all, Lobo, seen splashing about in the stream below the caves on German television. Seen climbing up a tree in the National Geographic magazine, and seen swing from a vine on NBC. It was all a kind of Filipino brigadoon. As the story went, sometime back in the mid-1960s, a local trapper named Dafal on the left ran across the Tassadai and became their cultural benefactor. He allegedly brought them knives and taught them how to hunt for animals. Dafal reportedly took the information to this man, Manuel Elizalde Jr., Manda for short, Ferdinand Marcos' tribal white man. This Harvard-educated heir to one of the Philippines' largest industrial conglomerates was entrusted with the protection of the many Philippine hill tribes through his Office of the Presidential Assistant for National Minorities, called Panamine. As the folks back in the cave, they call Manda Momodakal Dawata Tassadai, great man, god of the Tassadai, and they swooned over him. To service the cravings of a Tassadai-hungry press, Manda built a treetop helipad hard by the caves, and reporters' activities were carefully monitored. The result, a flurry of articles in major newspapers, magazines, even encyclopedias, capped off by the cave-side visit of a gun-toting Charles Lindbergh and Italian actress-photographer Gina Lollobrigida. It was a media carnival. The person who had the most access to Elizalde and the caves was reporter John Nance, author of The Gentle Tassadai and other books on the subject.
We saw the Tassadai as the people who were very touching, caring, affectionate, in a positive way with one another. And I felt that that was a whole new perception about who we were in that rainforest.
In 1974, the Marcos regime sealed off the entire Tassadai area by martial law and declared it a reservation, ostensibly to protect the tribal terrain of the Tassadai from land grabbers, loggers, and nosy journalists. The protection lasted 2 years. During that time, the Tassadai became a fixture in school curricula worldwide, a part of the cultural lore. Cut to February 1986, the departure of Ferdinand Marcos and the lifting of martial law. Doubts raised earlier by scientists about the authenticity of the tribe, suppressed for 12 long years, began to resurface in the Philippines. Professor Zeus Salazar had published an article back in 1971 pointing out linguistic discrepancies in the vocabulary of what were supposed to be non-agricultural cave dwellers.
There was a term for planting, there was a term for seed, there was a term for mortar, and there was a term for the roof of a house. So I couldn't see why they could have living in caves.
So it didn't fit.
It didn't fit. Also, the language didn't fit.
David Baradas, a former Panamanian anthropologist, seen here with Mrs. Marcos in earlier days, had headed the only proper anthropological study ever mounted on the Tassadai. It was doomed from day one, he recently told us. First, he noticed that cooked rice was being sneaked into the caves.
Our repeated request not to dole out food in order for us to get a more real view of their daily activity fall on deaf ears.
Baradas' cries of manipulation continued, and within days, mysterious armed men attacked his camp.
And at that moment, of course, the Tassadai got aroused, and they came down from their caves towards our tent with their bows and arrows. Now, we must recall earlier that this is a people that was brutal about to have no notion of war or aggression.
A mere 40 miles from the caves, local journalist Joey Lozano had been hearing strange Tassadai tales for years. For the people around here, how seriously was the Tassadai story taken?
I don't think any of them believed it.
Why not?
Because they knew they've been in contact with other tribes. For example, in Lake Cebu, when one time I went there, I asked people there, I told them I was interested in seeing the Tassadais. They said, why not wait here Saturday, because it's market day and some of them come here for marketing on Saturdays.
Then in March of this year, within a month of Ferdinand Marcos' departure, Lozano teamed up with Swiss journalist Oswald Eaton, and they slipped quietly into the Tassadai reservation with notebook and camera. Outside the rainforest, this is what they found. Bilangan and his wife Itut and their extended family living traditional bamboo hut, wearing traditional clothing. This is the Tassadai Gantui back in 1972. And this is how Eaton and Lozano found Gantui today, with his two wives. The tribesmen walked the strangers to the caves, long since empty, where Lobo demonstrated his world-renowned vine-swinging technique in blue jeans. The following week, a team from the German magazine Stern hired the hunter Dafal, the original discoverer of the lost tribe, to guide them to the famous Tassadai. Dafal took the Germans to the caves, and, surprise, the caves were no longer empty. Once again, the caves were filled with the cavemen. It seemed the Tassadai had gone from the space age back to the Stone Age in just 7 days.
Dafal, we are happy to be here. Dafal tells them that we are happy to be here.
Here's Gantui and his wives when the Germans found them. But remember, this is how they were photographed just 1 week earlier. Quite a contrast. The Germans noticed that the ladies were wearing modern garb beneath their freshly mended Lee skirts. Suspecting the Germans smelled a rat, which they did, Dafal vanished, and within hours, mysterious bandits descended upon the caves. They captured the German team and held them for ransom. Motivated by charges of a hoax, a third expedition was quickly mounted by the same group that had taken part in the story 15 years ago. Two Panamanian-approved anthropologists, writer John Nance, the hunter Dafal, and the original NBC News team headed by reporter Jack Reynolds. Their findings?
This is the first time that this many Tassadai have come out of the forest together. This is the first time men of the tribe have been inside a house. One said, "What kind of cave is this?"
The Europeans, NBC claimed, jumped to the wrong conclusion. They didn't understand that the Tassadai were just adapting to modern civilization.
The question is, did this group go back to rubber stamp your findings to try to preserve your own reputation in the light of the possible criticism?
Can I say for the motives of others, for me as a reporter, if this was a hoax, that's a heck of a story.
Sitting here today, away from the heat of the jungle, do you believe that the Tassadai are a genuine, major anthropological find? A major...
You would like that in one word?
Past? Yes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
With all these charges shooting back and forth, 2020 decided to find out firsthand what was going on inside that jungle. A giant hoax or a giant misunderstanding? but to avoid the bandits who had captured the Stern magazine team, and to test if the former Stone Age cavemen really do only hover close to home base as reported on NBC, we sent messengers to ask them to meet us at a mountain settlement almost a day's walk from their immediate area. We took a back route through the mountains, the first 5 hours by jeep along a deeply rutted logging route. It was clear that logging companies had stripped the landscape. Then in what proved to be an endurance test for our entire 2020 team, a grueling 10.5 hour trek that took us up and down the mountains, through the cornfields and rainforest, thickets, and more rainforest.
Hello? How are you?
It was late at night when we finally reached our destination, the settlement of Tobac. The campfires were burning to stave off the evening chill. And what do you think we found?
Tassadai. You Tassadai? I see, okay.
Oh, you're famous. You're on the cover of a magazine. Did you know that? Cover of a magazine. Intui. That's lovely. Very nice.
8 of the original so-called Tassadai had come to meet and greet us, poking fun, we noticed, at the tribal name by which foreigners had known them.
Tassadai. All right.
We awoke the following morning to the rhythm and hospitality of a typical Taboli settlement. There was the ever-present 2-string guitar, people cooking, building huts, and a natural part of it all, those adorable teenagers who have since become grown men with families of their own. They were intrigued and bewildered by all the cover stories attesting to their international stardom, like the National Geographic, which they had never seen. Yet beyond all the joking and camaraderie, a much uglier reality emerged. What we learned from these men over the next few days was not the Garden of Eden story we'd been regaled with over the years. It was a story, they said, which was choreographed by Manda Elizalde, a tragic tale of deception, coercion, isolation, and ultimately abandonment.
Were you born in the caves?
No, we were born in the area surrounding the caves.
What language do you speak?
We speak both Manubo and Taboli.
Did you learn those dialects from villagers that you were in contact with as you were growing up?
We learned them from our neighbors. As for me, my mother is a Manubo and my father is a Taboli.
Did you see other people as you were growing up? Did you have contact with other people before the fall came?
Yes, we did have contact with other people.
Then we went through all the photos of all the cave people in National Geographic.
Do these people still live in caves?
No.
They told us no one lived in the caves, that the caves were a place of reverence where they worshiped their ancestors, and that the general region of the holy caves was called Tassadai.
People all over the world have been told you were Tassadai cavemen, out of touch with other people, that you didn't wear clothes and you lived in caves. Were they lied to?
In our grandparents' time, they had no clothes because they were poor, but we did wear clothes.
Why did you go to the caves and take off your clothing and appear to be primitive cavemen?
Elizalde said if we went naked, we'd get aid because we'd look poor.
Were they rewarded? Did they get help?
None. We're poorer now than we were before.
We showed Gintui the 2 photos taken of his family just 1 week apart, and we asked him about their recent relapse from the Space Age to the Stone Age. Those, he said, were his normal clothes.
Why did you take your clothing off to pose?
He said the idea came from John Nance and Elizalde's former aide. Nance denied he told them to pose nearly naked.
What do you make of these 2 pictures?
I make it here we have a people really coming into another way of being, another way of seeing themselves, and another way of performing for different people, as everybody does. When we're on television, when we're in the privacy of our home, we're different people.
This is the tribal elder of the Tobac settlement. He's Datu Galong, a cousin, he told us, of Bilangan.
You are Bilangan.
Remember, Bilan and his wife Itut are the parents of Lobo and his brothers.
Were you asked to take your clothing off and wear a G-string or a fig leaf and pose in the nude?
Yes, Elizalde did tell me to put on a G-string and become a Tassadai.
Were you ever offered special incentive for your tribe if you would go along with and join the Tassadai?
There was a time when Elizalde offered me both money and rifle if I agreed to become a Tassadai. But I turned him down.
Documents obtained by 2020 reveal that not only did Elizalde arm these tribesmen to keep outsiders away from the Tassadai caves, he also armed them to fight the Marcos regime's ongoing battle against Mindanao's communist and Muslim rebels. Quite simply, he used them for counterinsurgency purposes. Elizalde's original excuse for closing off the Tassadai reservation was to protect the Tassadai from the cutthroat madness of the outside world.
But Panamanian documents obtained by 2020 reveal a much more sinister scheme. They reveal that Manda Elizalde's isolation of the so-called Tassadai was part and parcel of a Marcos regime plan to herd tribal Filipinos onto reservations to make way for logging and mining interests held by Panamanian board members.
The mountains of Mindanao contain an abundance of mica, manganese, copper, and most important of all, gold.
Who is this man?
Sino po nila?
Moloy ko niya.
Elizalde.
He made us call him Great Man, God of the Tassadai.
When Elizalde first came, we were ready to believe anything he said because he promised to help us. But so many years have come and gone, and we haven't gotten any kind of help. He just lied.
Obviously, we wanted to discuss all this Tassadai business with the great man, God of the Tassadai himself, Manda Elizalde Jr. But he just wasn't around. It seems that back in the fall of 1983, Manda fled the Philippines with $35 million of Panamanian's money. He just about emptied the till. But he didn't leave alone. According to former top Panamanian associates, he took at least 25 tribal maidens with him.
What an ending. This story is amazing all the way around. I remember when it first made the headlines.
Right.
Well, what happened to Manda Elizalde?
We traced him to San Jose, Costa Rica, where he's living now. He would not return any of the attempts that we made to contact him.
And what about the Tassadai? What happens to them?
Some of them, we're told, a few have gone into hiding. They're frightened because Manda did have some people loyal to him who were left behind there in the lower provinces, and they're afraid of them.
It's an unhappy ending all around, isn't it?
Yes.
The jury's still out on the fact that this might be a hoax?
Not as far as I'm concerned, from what I saw and those we talked to.
Yeah, it seems pretty definitive. Thank you, Tom, very much. It's really fascinating. 2020 will continue in a moment.
There's something creamy in the Jell-O.